Back during the summer, I did a series of polls where I pitted every follower in Skyrim against each other, and the winner of the tournament would become a challenge run. Sure, there were some upsets in there. Frankly, I was not expecting the two Khajiit followers to upset both Lydia and Aella. Guess that says something about my demographic or something. However, to absolutely nobody's surprise, Serana came out on top. Like, every round was a blowout with her. So it is inevitable I get around to this run. So today we will attempt to beat Skyrim as Serana. So for the restrictions of the run, I can only wear the Vampire Lord outfit, vampire boots, whatever rings and necklaces I can find, and I guess braces if I feel like it but I never end up using it, so I'm going to be a little frail in the defense department. I will let myself start with the Lord outfit since otherwise you can't actually get the outfit until halfway through the Dawnguard questline and or at level 12. As for spells, anything that lets me raise the dead, any lightning or frost related spells, and that's about it. As for other stuff, since Serana is heavily implied to be a Vampire Lord, hell, she gives it to you if you side with the Dawnguard, I'll let myself transform into a Vampire Lord, but by the end of the run I will have to max out the Vampire Lord skill tree. I did run this as a poll and you were all okay with it. As for other rules, normally I ban companions for my runs, however since I will be completing the Dawnguard questline, I will let myself have Serana as a follower since what is better than one Serana? Plus she tags along for most of the questline anyways. And as for other side objectives, I have a lot of them to do today. Basically becoming the dominant vampire group of Skyrim, so that means taking on any impure vampire threats like in Morthal, the Wolf Queen, Bloodshield Manor, and doing a few of the Radiant Volknar quests because some of them are actually really good. Well, with a long to-do list on the table, time to get started. So in building my character, I make my best effort. I think I mentioned in every video that the character creator is very much not my strong suit, plus Serana has a different hairstyle from the default option, so that's something. Also, I messed up the hair color, a little gray compared to the regular options, but I was messed up by the lighting anyways. We can say this is a middle-aged Serana cosplayer. After all, Skyrim did come out nearly 13 years ago. Enjoy your existential crisis! Anyways, after a mini-era nap, glad to see heads are still optional. As for the city escape, I thought I could be cheeky and do a speedrun skip that lets you skip right to the keep. However, I forgot how it went, and plus I'm not a high elf, and I fell down and I have to climb the tower again. Oops. As for the keep itself, I sided with Hadvar to speed up the opening. As soon as I was unbound, I gave myself the Vampire Lord attire so I can look the part a little bit more. Compared to most other challenge runs where I skip the opening, I don't have to wait very long to get my first spell, which is in the torture chamber, as in one of the cells is a Sparks book. Now I can shock the local Stormcloaks. You know, it really fits their name quite well. I continue to give everyone the sparking hell treatment as I emerge outside in the sunshine. Now comes my first major objective, and that is to grow fangs. And no, I'm not talking about the furry kind either. Before then, I stopped by the Riverwood Trader and purchased some spells to learn for later. Then I left outside to head up the road to Whiterun, only to thin out the wolf and giant population in the process. I then made a few trips around to get the vendor chest for some potions since I'm going to need all the help I can for the early portion. I then take the time to disenchant and enchant some stuff for free level up to help survive in an upcoming dungeon dive. With my work done, I left for Riften. Inside Riften, I don't immediately behead Grelad, but instead walk down the road a little bit to the southeast until I came upon the cave that leads to the Dawnguard castle. The game recommends tackling the DLC at level 10, not at level 1, hence why the cave is unmarked, so I'm in for a very funny time. I enter the cave and walk through the huge empty location Dawnguard just loves. Outside the castle proper, I do find Durak vibing, and attempts to recruit me into the Dawnguard. You know, that's why I'm here, genius. I talk to Isran, lie about saying I will help the Dawnguard, knowing full well the next time I'll be back here, it will be for a good old-fashioned purge. He points me towards the vampire cave, so I depart and head there. Back in Dawnstar, I encountered Karjo, the runner-up to the whole tournament thing. A funny encounter come to think about it. Anyways, I walked to the south a bit until I came across the Hall of Vigilance, who weren't very vigilant of their surroundings and was burnt to a crisp. I grabbed what little supplies I could, climbed up the mountainside to the Lord Stone. The game is really suggesting grabbing the stone because I'm going to be in for a fun time, level 10 dungeon at level 1, and as a mage on top of it, which is my least favorite way of playing Skyrim. I'm in for a world of pain. Inside Dim Hollow Crypt, I'm met with some lovely vampires and their hard-hitting hounds. I ignore the group in the first room, and in the second room I just closed the doors behind me so the vampires would stop following me. Here I meet one of the many types of new enemies here in the DLC the game loves to throw at you, the Death Hounds. Though one decides to do a high jump. I began to ignore everyone for the remainder of the first part, contracting the vampire disease in the process, so I somewhat joined the part. As for the second portion, all I can say is pain. Everyone from the first part joins up, and while I can thin out a few in the process, the damage is way too much for my level 1 self, and I'm draining my life essence in more ways than one. For my second attempt, I book it away from the first group, and I made a pretty smart play, for my standards anyways, of diving into the water. Since the pool below where Serana hangs out messes with the enemy pathfinding and I could sneak away with ease. Well, I tried returning to the middle portion, but a couple thralls and a vampire master were all that's left. But this I could handle. I plucked away at Lokil and his thralls, and if I was low on health I could take a swim in the water to lose aggro, and it works out quite well. Eventually Lokil was low killed and I could begin the puzzle to release Serana. I say puzzle in a loose sense and you're just pushing pillars into place. Once the puzzle is done, I meet up with the Vampire Lord of Fan Service and we can begin to escape the dungeon. We are introduced to gargoyles, which are level 13, and we are only going on level 4 right now, so not much for offense. Yeah, sure they do hit very hard, so I employ the good old hide in the water trick, which does get results. During the escape I led Draugr into a circle until I could grab my loot, and I can finish this dungeon finally. Back outside I began the hike from Solitude towards Castle Volkihar, and on the way there we did have a few encounters. The first one was a free bottle of booze, which I will take. Second thing was on the way there I ran across a cave you normally get spat out of when you finish the embassy quest, though I don't fancy getting trolled right now. Lastly on my travels I began exterminating whatever mudcrab, bandit, or horker came across me. I will take whatever experience I can get at this point. Once I reached my destination I took a boat ride to the castle. I meet up with Harkon, and as thanks for rescuing his other daughter, he grants me the Vampire Lord ability, so now we can get the ball rolling. I am introduced to a tutorial on how to control the Vampire Lord, which is pretty useful for me I guess. Also, this is the first time I have ever done the vampire side of the Dawnguard, so this will be somewhat new to me. Well, I say somewhat new, but the only difference between the two routes is just the first quest after whether or not you accept the Vampire Lord or not, so So next up I follow Garan around the table so we can get started on the Bloodstone Chalice quest, which does grant some nice perks with it, but given how the last dungeon went, I do want to make myself a little bit stronger, so time to get started on the main story. I then returned to Riverwood and talked to Faendal since I did say during the tournament I would side with the winner of the Sven and Faendal vote, and yeah, nobody likes Sven. I gave the letter to Camilla and let the Wood Elf be forever in my debt, which I do nothing about, but oh well. At least I remembered this quest. Also, since I am a vampire during the day, my stamina does not regenerate, just makes things more tedious, but then again, I have beat Skyrim while both over-encumbered and at 0.1 scale. This is nothing. Up at the tower before Bleak Falls Barrow, I turn into a Vampire Lord and start sucking the life out of the bandits here to get started on leveling up the Lord perks. I honestly did not want to level up the Vampire Lord form much right now because I wanted more focus on leveling up my destruction. Mostly so I don't use as much magicka to cast spells, since I don't really know how to play mages very well besides using the special robes that conflict with my attire restrictions. Inside the burrow proper I did use my Sith Lightning on the bandit outlaw here, and it got some results, just took a bit to take down. As for the giant frostbite spider, I did not know it could do a jump attack, so new fear unlocked. Otherwise, I pelted the spider from behind the door as usual until it came down, so to reward Auriel for surviving one nightmare feel, I transformed into another nightmare feel and cut him down to size. For the rest of the Draugr on the inside, I used my basic spark spells, and by spamming the attack, they were all Frankensteined into the afterlife. The same held true for the Overlord at the end, didn't really feel like attacking me. Fine by me, easy battles are easy battles. I took the stone over to Whiterun, and I take up Armin's request just because. Up at Dragon's Reach, it was business as usual and I get to fight a dragon. Hooray! Mirmalmir wasn't really much to write home about today. It was way more concerned with the other guards here. I hid behind cover because as a vampire I'm a little on the crispy side of things, but with how much help you get in this fight, the dragon was of little concern and I could claim my reward for being moral support. Also, Farngard makes for a nice treat on the side. With my business done in Whiterun, I do get an upgrade on my spells. As tempting as getting Choking Grasp is, given the fan base, I pass it up. As for the choking part, I have another thing in mind. Since I am in the neighborhood, I thought, why not, I could go clear out a bandit camp for Armin. I test out my new spells on the site, and dual casted they do one-shot a lot of the bandits, but I can only cast 2 to 3 spells before having to recharge my batteries. Inside the cavern, I do end up having to kite around the bandit chief, but given my range and knowledge on how the AI works, I can dodge everyone here with ease, claim my rewards including how to ruin the economy, then return the sword to Armin for experience in classes I cannot use for the run. I also take the time to buy some healing potions for what's to come. Well, I figure it is time to break the game so I can make it through the next dungeon. Back in Dawnstar, I took a quick jog to the east until I came across Hobbs Fall Cave. If you watched my Santa Claus video from last year, you will know where this is going. This is a little necromancer cave with some worthwhile loot to it. I zapped the easy skeletons and necromancers here into little dust bunnies. Anyways, the reason that I came into this dungeon is for a chest containing many DLC spells from the Anniversary Edition. Why the hell are they there? Honestly, do not know. And frankly, all these spells are frankly very overpowered. The one I came here for is the Unbound spells for a little glitch. I don't plan on using these for combat though. I have another plan for them. I clear out the rest of the dungeon without much fuss. These necromancers spray me with frost magic after all, and between my vampire and Nord blood, I laugh at the frost. Once I was back outside the dungeon, I held the Unbound Freezing spell and fast traveled to Bleak Falls Barrow, in the process leveling up my Destruction to 70, which I am more than content with for the run. For 1, less spell cost, and for 2, augmented spark spells for later. They will definitely help out my damage. With more powers at my fingertips, I returned to Riften, ran across my nemesis again, all smug-like, then wandered through a forest into Redwater Den. Along the way, I came across some spiders with 1,000,000 health, and not wanting to take an hour to run through my magic pool, I just ran right into the skooma den. Inside the den proper, I began blasting at the employees here, grabbing the keys to get into the basement. Down here I blasted all the silly vampires, taking my level ups and buffing my damage, and it is carving through the level 10 vampires like a normal encounter, which I will take. This must be what being an intended level does. The rest of the first section there wasn't much of note, just some death hounds playing guard dogs. The second section was a little more interesting, besides not paying attention to my surroundings and falling into a trap. I just blasted at the enemies here, playing things smart until I came across a room with a massive vampire. They must have forgotten their glasses and I was able to zap them from afar without getting noticed. There was a small passage afterwards with a lot of traps, so I had to carefully navigate my way through. The boss room, the boss vampire got the drop on me, so I was in a little bit of danger, but using my somewhat spherical brain, I lured everyone into the trap room to pick them off. Well, they weren't falling into the traps per se, but rather the named vampire got trapped behind one of the spike walls and I could just walk on past. Only downside of doing it this way is that I had to pick a master level lock. Master locks at level 16 lockpicking isn't fun. Inside the final room of the dungeon is a fight against 2 named vampires, Stealth and Salonia. Gotta love ambushes. They do hit somewhat hard, but they don't have a lot of health, so it didn't take too long to take down. I just had to play it smart around a pillar, and once Salonia went down, the rest of the battle was good as won. With the corpses on the floor, I scooped up the Danger Kool-Aid, escaped out of the dungeon, and returned to the castle. Next up, we were going to capture a Moth priest. Well, sure, you're supposed to go around Skyrim and talk to the innkeeps on where the priest is. I know that the priest is in a cave south of Dragon's Bridge. Also, Serana joins back up for this quest, so now it will be a double team for most of the run. When I did return to the Shrine of Meridia, we are besieged by a group of Dawnguard. Dawnguard battles are going to be really iffy for the run because their armor reduces vampire damage and their weaponry are super effective against vampires. It's almost like they are vampire hunters or something. I did have to take it pretty easy since I could probably be two-shot by the Dawnguard members, but with Serana by my side and doing most of the work, the fight was a piece of cake. Inside Dragon's Bridge, I got a dinner invitation so I can do that quest whenever I wanted. Down the road a little bit is Forebear's Holdout. The dungeon itself isn't very long, just had a big fight in the courtyard with a bunch of Dawnguard who does hit pretty hard, so I have to play it cautiously. Well, the real Serana does most of the heavy lifting. I had to play it cautiously and the battle was easily won. There was a named Dawnguard member here, but honestly I have no idea what happened to him. I was just taking out the armor troll in the meantime. When the Dawnguard finally went down, I brought the priest to his knees, where I dazed him and drank his blood, so now he is our thrall. But I forgot to talk to him before leaving, so I had to re-go through the caves so I can tell him where our hideout's location is. When he arrives in our hideout, he tells us to gather the 3 Elder Scrolls to know the location of Auriel's bow, so now to begin that giant collectathon. I talked to Serana and she clues us in on one such location, but I really don't fancy going to purple colored land at the moment, so I put that on pause for quite a long while, and I wanted to head to Winterhold to get the Dragon Scroll first. Gotta beat Skyrim after all. The internal forces of the game must have known because once I arrived at the location I had to fend off a dragon. The fight wasn't too bad, just hanging around near houses that thankfully this is a video game and they don't burn down. Eventually the worm lands for good and I skipped the death animation and got a soul in my belly. Little did I know this is going to be a very common occurrence during the run. With that all done, I carefully descended the cliffside, then talked to my popsicle to get keys to Aftan. Probably not a good idea to get it done now, but for the next few hours I have a lot of focus issues. On my way to Aftan, I watched as the Stormcloaks and Imperials have an all-out battle and the Imperials come out on top, so now they can help me with the Frost Rice. And sure, the Frost Rice do hit pretty hard, even with my frost resistances, but then again, I'm not pumping all my level ups into health, so that does not help things at all. Eventually we come out on top, only to come across even more on the way to Aftan. This game really hates me today. As for the dungeon proper, I use my high voltage and backup to take on the spider workers. Seems the dwarven constructs are immune to icicles in the head. Then again, what aren't they immune to? As for the random Khajiit that hangs out here, I do find it pretty funny that he ends up dying from his resurrected friend. Karma. Anyways, for the rest of the first fight I run past everything, and since I don't have become ethereal, and I sort of banned using non-essential dragon shots for the run, I have to descend the central room the somewhat intended way. I would have preferred not to given how hard the Falmer do hit, but with Serana catching up they were put down easily enough. Glad I can be carried this run. Though on my way down I do try to do a small skip by landing on one of the rooftops. though I did end up slipping at one point, but oh well, just had to wait a little bit more to refill my health. Eventually I booked it out of the second part and just ran right to Blackreach. Since I don't really want to fight anything here since I'm pretty frail right now, I just booked it right to the Dragon Scroll, which I lodged on my back, so now I'm matching Serana. And while I could go get the last scroll and try to finish up the Dawnguard questline, I wanted to save that for much later in the run. Wanted to prepare myself to see purple for an hour. Back outside, I ran to the southeast of Afton to knock out the Creation Club bonus objective that is here. Just have to avoid some more ice wraiths. Anyways, inside Bloodshield Cavern we have a wonderful feast in which I do the first carve. There are two outcomes to this quest. One is as a vampire where you call it Dawnguard, which is easy enough, and then there's the harder variant if you're not a vampire, which you have to fight a level 60 vampire or something stupid like that. Oh, I love Creation Club balance. I will gladly take the easy way out with this, and I get a cool house in the process. I also check out my sweet pad once the culling was done, and I will never come back. At least I do have a second set of vampire armor, and randomly ebony armor is also here. Oh well. Next up on my to-do list is taking on the Cry Wolf quest, since that's another one of my bonus objectives. After hearing the pleas, I decided, yeah, I could help with the necromancer problem. I traveled to the cave and clear out the welcoming party. Before the cool castle part, I have to deal with the Draugr Scourge, which is way above my mana pool. Well, I guided the Scourge around some platforms, letting Serana catching her breath, and when I get the Scourge below half health, I spam the shock spell until it turns into a dust bunny, which will be how I tackle a lot of the fights going forward, especially those with a lot of health. As for the cool castle itself, seriously, this is one of my favorite areas in the game. I carefully took out the enemies from afar. Not quite stealth archer where you can actually choose this entire section by sniping the person on top of the tower, but oh well. Once the welcoming party was cleared out, I began clearing out the interior, just testing my patience with wards. This is more or less a standard dungeon dive, just running out of magic because I like to hold down the kill button. There is a reason I rarely play as a mage, because I just don't have fun playing with them. Call it skill issues or limitations of challenge runs. Anyways, I interrupt the necromancer ritual, and now the necromancers can enter the eligible resurrection pool. I relayed the good news to Falk, and now I can wait until the next part of the quest comes around. Next up, I attempt to do some of the Radiant quests in Castle Volcanar. Sadly, it is pretty RNG dependent on whether I get the quest I want or not, and at first I get to kill a master vampire somewhere, and I decided it wasn't worth my time right now since I'd have to pray I would get one of the required quests I want. Also on my way to the dungeon I had a dragon swoop in on me, so that was fun. The next Radiant location they wanted me to go to is middle of nowhere Rorikstead, which I really did not want to do, so I abandoned upgrading the Bloodstone Chalice and getting the Rings of Magic, at least for now. Whether I return or not depends on how I feel. Anyways, I wanted to get started on powering up my Vampire Lord form, and what better way to do that than to declare war with bandits. Also during my purge, I may or may not have killed a Khajiit caravan, but oh well. Fort Greymoor wasn't much to write home about, truth be told. I then decided to travel to Embershard Mines and cleared out the dungeon. Then I decided to get the main story back on track. For my travels to Ivarstead, it was scenic route today. At the toll booth tower, the bandits were a little aggressive. Also, I wasn't getting many feeds to power up my Vampire Lord form, but oh well. I also had the bandit chief decide today was the one day he would wear his unique silver armor from Creation Club. Oh well, I weaved around his attacks and his blood kept me fed for a little bit longer. I then continued down the road a little bit more, turning a farmer into livestock, and cleared out another fort since I was in the area. On the interior, I had another death. This one, I decided today was a very good day to stand in front of a flamethrower while at max weakness to fire. Second go around and play things a little bit smarter and I don't become a barbecue. Also in my rampage, I ransacked a small mining community. Looks like Durnehviir won't have anywhere to come home to now, if he ever gets out, that is. Nothing much else of note climbing up to Ivarstead, but from a goat I got the ability to use Vampiric Grip, which isn't your average drain spell. And the saber cat was also not immune to this throw, and the troll down here also was a victim to more throws. Truth be told, the Vampiric Grip throwing wildlife off mountains like ragdolls breathed so much life into the game because I was on the verge of quitting the run, like a couple Starfield runs that I had recorded but never edited. I forgot about draining life. Throwing wildlife off the mountainsides was way more fun. As for the frost troll, by Azura, that felt so good. Anyway, Serana was really wanting to partake in prayer with the Greybeards, much to her dismay. As for the whirlwind sprint training, I wanted to use my vampiric form to try to get through the gates with the bats. Yeah, that sounds about right. Once I do things the intended way, I traveled to Morthal and knock out a couple more things in the area. But before I do that, I had to contend with yet another dragon. These towns can't catch a break today, it seems. Well, by playing from afar, the dragon can go down for a nap for good, easy cleanup, and as soon as I got my soul, I had cultist A posts to express their superiority on the better DLC. Anyways, I decided to stay in town to do its only real side quest, Lay to Rest. I talked to the Jarl, then a ghost, and I have to wait for nightfall. Here I blast Lay into dust, and then I get to sneak into Alva's house. Normally Hrothgar will attack you when you try to sneak inside, but I use my vampire seduction to make this vampire thrall my thrall. Plus it makes my bloodlust go away so I'm not extra crispy when it comes to fire attacks. Anyways, I run down the road a bit into the vampire lair. I decided to bring out my vampire lord to get some perks for bloodlust, and to show dominance on the vampire menace down here. I did get close to death at one point because dummy me ran out of mana, but oh well. But eventually I was able to slay the vampires down here and claim my prize from the Jarl, so next up is Usengrav. Between the necromancy and our combined power, the necromancers were blasted down pretty easily, and the Draugr were comboed to death and turned back to dust. During the second portion, most runs I grabbed to become Ethereal Shout, but since I don't need it today, I just fall right to the gates, become Vampire Lord, and dash right through the gates with ease. So much better without the graybeards breathing down my neck. Also, fun fact, when using my spell form, the vampire does not touch the floor technically, so I can glide on across and never get ignited. I decided to bully the frostbite sweater at the end by chucking it on the fire repeatedly until it succumbs to his wounds. That also felt pretty good. Anyways, I grabbed my shoehorn and returned to Riverwood to continue the main story. Once I had the relevant information from Delphine, I decided to go around the world killing whatever stood in my way so I can start getting the rest of my vampire power perks because, oh boy, they do take quite a while. From Fort Greymore, I hiked my way to the west watching bandits and zombies and giants duke things out. I continued my way west hunting deer until I came across Rorikstead, and I thought since I was in the neighborhood I could kill the Dawnguard that's here for the raiding quest. It was a new day and I learned that the rings are actually worth going for after all. The only issue here is that the guards here do hit somewhat hard, plus they aren't really so keen on an eldritch abomination strolling on into town, and also they do have a lot of health, but by weaving around I can take them out with ease. As for the Dawnguard member, given my very weak nature, so I play it safe and he goes down. I then entered Riften for the first time and I am pretty hungry. With the kids traumatized for life, I decided to hike my way to Kynesgrove, blood for perks after all. Not much happened on my way there, just wiping out the forts, and my damage as a vampire lord is really starting to fall off. Probably not the best idea to have power level destruction, but give and take. At least I have gravity to solve my problems. Also my travels, I cleared out the local dogfight arena. Yeah, I proved I am the top dog here, though the bouncy here did have a fiery great sword that straight up took out over half of my health, but I mean, messing with the AI in the cave was pretty easy. As for the rest of my journey, I did wipe out an Imperial camp and more wolves. Also, I didn't feel so good about going after horses for experience, but oh well. Right before Kynesgrove, I disengaged vampire form so Delphine doesn't go after me, just a local innkeep. Oh well. So for the Salaknir fight, normally I am by myself, but today I have both Delphine and Serana as backup, and the fight was over in a ridiculously short amount of time. I think me menuing to apply a magic potion was like half the fight. Well, I discussed tactics with Delphine, and next up is the Thalmor Embassy, but before then, yet another dragon attack. This is how many we are on now? So for the Smug High Elves, I went into this mission with one thing in mind, vampire form experience, and it was pretty fun destroying every high elf I came across. The embassy itself was pretty easy, though Malborn did try to kill me. Don't blame him if the person he was helped smuggling in is an actual monster. As for the outside, there was a flame atronach, so I had to play things carefully, but by hugging the outside wall and screwing with pathfinding I can pick off the elves, mostly the wizard, and then clean up house. As for the Solar, Rulindel kept on holding up a ward making my scratch damage blood magic blink right off, so I brought out my poison claws, and with all the poison stacks, the high elf became a scratching post, and Gasir suffered the same fate. Extended the same warm welcome to the prisoner down here, and when the group with Malborn came in, they all united to attack me. Granted, I am the much greater threat, but hey, 3 points of experience I will take. I also ignored the frost roll, no cliffs to throw it off, and left back to Riverwood to start the Ratways. Before entering the Ratways, I did turn Shivari into dust, and for the interior, seems the archer here found my weakness and straight up two-shot me. I know I'm weak to fire, but yikes. Second go around, I focused on the archer first and foremost. Serana might have been used as cover fire, but oh well. Once I cleared out the welcoming part, the rest of the first section goes down easily enough, and I book it right to Esbern. Despite the neighborhood, his rent is still probably $1,500 a month, which will probably age very poorly in a few weeks. As for the escape, I hate wards, but at least the wizards can be turned into dust as they should. As for the escape, I had a lone wizard left, and I said hell with it. I booked it out of the sewers, reunited the worst faction in the game, then traveled to Rorikstead. Since every other town has had a dragon attack, Rorikstead is no different. Thankfully, this dragon is pretty easy given the amount of backup I have. Strength does come in numbers after all. As for Karspire on the outside, I was going to fight the entire army here, but I have two problems. 1, the sun was out, and given my night owl gremlin tendencies, I am really nerfed. And for 2, I left all my backup behind somewhere, which is alright by me. The first one were pretty passive today. That and the dragon didn't spawn until I was basically at the door to the dungeon proper. Inside the place, the Briarheart here did hit me somewhat harder than usual, but it goes down easily enough. I do my usual simple puzzles, do a blood donation to make Harkon upset, then learn the information to set me up to fight Alduin. However, this is where I put my main story detour on halt until the end of the run. Got a vampire problem to solve first. Since my small brain forgot about it, I returned to the Blue Palace to get the Wolf Queen Awaken quest started. About damn time. I talked to the priest who gives me the keys into the crypt under the temple. Not where I would house this universe's Margaret Thatcher, but whatever. Inside the Undercroft, I was met with a lot of undead, which does count as experience, so more reason to use a vampire lord form down here. I also blasted a vampire onto a flame trap, so there's karma for you. Not a particularly long dungeon, I also do find a cool Draugr wake up out of the water. Not much happened during the excursion until the end, so let's skip there. The boss fight against Batema is more or less just a multi-enemy fight with a constant electric beam going around the area. It is more or less an annoyance than anything. I kept on focusing on the ads since they are just experience in my eyes. Eventually the only enemy left was a Scourge who does hit somewhat hard, just don't get hit. The big thing is that it does have a lot of health, but by throwing it up at the ceilings, gravity solves any problem. There is a ghost in the next room, but it goes down with relative ease, and before too long I'm back at the Blue Palace getting my gold reward and not having to worry about getting mind controlled. Since I have put off the Dawnguard questline for long enough, time to get that back on track. Well, I did turn in the Radiant quest, couldn't find Serana to get more Radiant quests, so I just ignored that for the time being and started climbing through the underkeep of the castle. On the outside there was a bunch of skeletons that don't die in one hit, so I toss them into the sea because it amuses me. Then I entered the inside of the dungeon. I am not a big fan of the basement because dark corridors are all the same, though the vampire and rogue hellhounds down here do prove a nuisance. Also at one point I had to take off my vampire lord form because I'm a little too tall. Inside the courtyard, having already done this dungeon back in the restoration run, I know where all the mirror shards are, so the puzzle only takes about a minute, and we're back into climbing into more poorly lit passageways. I walked in on a dinner feast, sadly the skeletons were all bones. Experience is experience. The only thing of note during the excursion were the gargoyles again. I am leveled up at this point, and they all go down soon enough. Just takes a lot of blasting. Stone is resilient after all. Also, before diving inside, I did drink out of the chalice so my magicka is restored after every hit, so I can keep on blasting. In the last room before the portal, I did remember about the Vampire Lord armor. Yet another set, even though we are about 75% done with the run, but oh well. I also remembered about the candlestick this time, so I'm not stuck here for 5 minutes. Anyways, inside the portal room I grabbed my information needed, then entered the Soul Cairn. No need to get soul trapped or become a vampire. I'm already one. So for the Soul Cairn proper, it is probably my least favorite location in the game. Seems Bethesda took notes from Valak Mountain from Xenoblade. Big empty area with anything important miles away, but this time the shading is awful so you can't see very far ahead. I just sprinted towards the shadows of Valerica, and she tasked us with killing big bone guardians dressed in dragonbone armor. I would be nervous if it weren't for the fact I can toss them around like ragdolls. Why work hard when I can have gravity do my dirty work? Works especially well on the archer on the tower. The third bowman had some ads so I had to deal with them, but by keeping the guardian grounded I could focus on the ads, then make the keeper suffer until he gives up. I returned to Mother, so now we can proceed into the courtyard where we were besieged by Durnehviir. If there is any way I can describe the dragon, it is a Trail series boss. Loves to move around to disrupt formation, but more importantly summoning so many ads when you clear around. Since I don't have the mana to use my higher tier spells, I focus on the bowman with my basic sparks while the ladies use bonding time to fight the main boss, using spare time to do some chip damage. Eventually the dragon was grounded for good, and with 3 characters attacking at once the dragon goes into timeout mode, and I can claim the 3rd Elder Scroll. No idea where to stick this one. Once that was done and dusted, I talk to the boss and he gives me his contact information. Sadly Durnehviir can't take me to Skuldafn, so I leave him behind, and I make my escape out of the Purple Sadness Land. Back at HQ I learned the Moth Priest was blinded, probably saw some R34 Septimus or something, but he gives me the destination where we can read the Elder Scrolls without side effects, which is conveniently in Skyrim. But before then, I really wanted to get some rings since it will help me out so much for the late game fights, since I won't be using Vampire Lord form for much longer. I guess before I get the rings quest, the Radiant system sent me towards Morvascar, which I did in the last run to pick up some vampire parts. I just blasted out the mages and they were all on the very weak side, and I got my second to last perk. Also before entering the keep, more Dawnguards attacked, but much like the Belmont bloodline I put them into a 1-star say. Inside the keep proper, it's a super short dungeon I'm at the end. Sure, the mage at the end does have a lot of health, but that isn't something gravity can't fix. Anyways, inside the chest is a vampire arm. I don't want to know how long that's been in there. Anyways, for every body part that you find, it extends the duration of drinking the bloodstone chalice by 2 days, which the basic spell absorbs stamina and magicka. I returned to Farron and he tasked me with getting some rings, finally, which is why I'm doing the raiding quest to begin with. The first ring is in Morvar's lair, which I cleared out a few dozen paragraphs ago, so I re-cleaned out the place, and everyone here was of the weak sauce variety. I grabbed my ring from the chest, which boosts magicka and magicka regeneration, which does affect my vampire lord form. Frankly, I'm excited I have more magicka to my name. The other ring is in Silent Moon Camp, which just means more experience for my dumb bonus objective. Anyways, the ring is on the inside of the camp, which boosts your health and your claw damage, which does help out quite a bit. Frankly, I don't think I've ever been inside Silent Moon proper. Oh well, ring is mine and I can return to the main quest. Back in Falkreath, I am honestly not surprised another dragon paid a visit, though it doesn't want to stick around to fight. Must have known I'm getting really sick of them. Down the road a bit, I climbed the mountainside and arrived in a forested cave. The trees kinda remind me of the lost colony from Xenoblade 3, truth be told. Anyways, the reason we are here is to grab bark from a tree, guide moths to a flame, then open up my toilet reading material to find the location to spend the next 6 hours in. But before departing the cave, we have to contend with a lot of Dawnguard, obviously wanting to stop us from getting the bow that we can't even use because of the rule set. Well, unfortunately for them, they are on a cliffside, and if there's one weapon I can use effectively, that is gravity. I fling the foes around the room because that is probably what Serana Sims would want to happen to them. All the vampire hunters go down without much fuss, and time to start my most mixed place in the game. On my way to Darkfall Cave, not much happened except some hired thugs came after me. Probably for a potion I stole or something. It's been a long run, okay? I also flung around the saber cats because Ice Age has never been good outside the first one. As for Darkfall Cave, I just sprinted on through. I have a stupidly long area to get through, and I turned on the vampire's innate night vision goggles because edgy low lighting for immersion. Eventually I meet an elf of the icy variety and he wants me to kill his brother. As for the next part of the Vale quest, we have to go through Darkfall Passage, which is even more dark-filled dungeon crawling with a lot of Falmer. I just speed past everything here because I couldn't be buggered. I just flung around some Falmer into a waterfall to help clear the way. Eventually the cave opens up to some regional variant fauna, thankfully still weak to gravity so I fling them around, though one saber cat did live and I have to fight it the old-fashioned way. Eventually we get spat out into Valak Mountain. The Forgotten Vale is a location I am very mixed on. It has a lot of cool aspects to it, but the map makes it horrible to navigate, and the hidden objectives and other things. I tend to not come back here after I'm done with this place because I couldn't be bothered. I climbed the hill and grabbed some water from the altar, then proceed to the spider ambush. I squished the spiders and sucked their innards outwards because karma, and I finally got the last point in the Vampire Lord perk tree, so that objective is done, so now I can speed up my travels here. And really, I just sprinted my way through the place, though I did introduce a frost giant to the concept of waterboarding. I was also careful to avoid spawning the double dragon fight because they're like level 50 and I have little in the way of cover. Inside the glacial crevice, I continued to be enthralled by flinging around the enemies to their demise, and the level design is just asking me to do that. Eventually I get my last drop of water and I can enter the Ice Palace. The castle itself is pretty cool, pun intended. If you try to grab one of the nailed down items, the ice enemies will wake up. Eventually we fight the lovely enemy horde with Hrothgar, and I wanted to keep my health ring on because I have next to no health otherwise, so I'm going to be running out of magicka often. At least for the Battle of the Falmer do have little health so I can zap them into bits. Eventually the ceiling starts collapsing and it does do quite a bit of damage, but with how many potions I have been hoarding I get through the fight just fine, and we all fall down. At least Serana helps her other self up. Eventually we confront Hrothgar on the rooftop. I'm sorry Serana, that isn't how you choke a simp. This is how you choke a simp. Mission complete, we grab our MacGuffin we can't use. Hell, Serana's least used weapon type is the bow, so double the reason we can't use it. Well, with all that done, time to wrap up the DLC. We warp back to the castle, and there really isn't much fanfare unlike the Dawnguard side where you do a massive fight against vampires. Well, we just dive right into the final boss. So the Harkon fight is pretty fun. Really should have put on the mana ring back on, but I wanted safety for this fight. The gimmick is that Harkon can teleport all over the place, throw a lifesteal ball at you, basically all the abilities we can do as a Vampire Lord except choke. Probably for the best. Anyways, the other gimmick is that once you bring his health down a bit, he will regenerate in a bubble that you pop with Auriel's bow, but since we can't use it, just gotta wait it out. I thought that Harkon can only bubble 2 times and not 3, so after the third bubble, I threw everything I had, except I didn't feel like bringing out my magicka ring because how stupid of me, and eventually wanting to pass the DPS check I turned into my vampire lord form, so things are a little more fair. We trade blows for a while, eventually I brought out my claws, ripped and tore until he was done, and turned into a pile of goop. So DLC complete, but I was not done with the Dawnguard quest quite yet. So the last thing I want to do with the vampires is to destroy the Dawnguard, but before then more RNG BS with the radiant system. Thankfully all I had to do beforehand was turn a dock worker in Riften into a vampire. I mean, Riften sucks as it is, why not add a new variation to the term suck? I return to the castle and get instructions to kill the Dawnguard, and I couldn't be more happy. I fast traveled to the fort, and frankly all the Dawnguard members here were on the easy side of things. Not much health but made up for in numbers, but I had one target in mind. That's for making me lose Necromage during my restoration run. Prick. Anyways, I became the Vampire Hunter's worst nightmare, and with the power of irony, the Vampire Hunters were no more, and I don't bother with the Dark Brotherhood this playthrough, but I have my fun nevertheless. So before I have to deal with fire-breathing dragons again, I figured now is a good time to prepare for the final battles. I enchanted a necklace that gives me a 30% resistance to fire on top of my boots, so I shouldn't have to worry about my combustibility now. I also stopped at the store to get enough magicka potions to last a battle. With nothing left to lose, I returned to the Greybeards, watched the real Serana somehow not be fazed by the loud voices in the room, learn my soft lock prevention, meet a friendly dragon who tells me about the Elder Scrolls, and learn my information for Alduin. This Alduin fight was very easy today, and I didn't even have to pop my Vampire Lord form. Figured for the Alduin fights to make things more interesting, I don't use the Vampire Lord. Alduin kept on getting stunned and couldn't do much. I kept on blasting with my electric bolts, and when he tried to do an attack, it just failed. And for the most part, he was stuck in place and couldn't do much of anything. In fact, had he not unleashed his fireball attack, I could have done this fight without taking any damage, so that's a win in my book. Also, when I talked to Party Snacks after the battle, I interrupted him at the right time and was T-posing in the air. Don't mess with the Nintendo ninjas. Next up is the Peace Council. Yay, woo, hooray, everyone's favorite part. Also, I had not stepped foot inside Windhelm this run, so I had to walk there. I tried doing the jail award, but the guards forgave my actions. Probably knowing I saved the world from myself and going to save it from another world ender. I did my best to not fall asleep during the peace talks. I just love pointless drama. Also, during the talks, Serana stole Esbern's seat. Once pointlessness was done, I turned into a vampire lord and threw everyone off the mountain. That part was fun at least. Well, last up is Skuldafn, which will go down as one of the most chaotic Skuldafns I've ever had. But before then I waited in Dragon's Reach so I don't have to deal with the sun like most gamers. I decided to pop Vampire Lord here, and it'll come to bite me in the arse later on. At first I had a dragon harass me with fire so I had to take cover. Took some time taking out the small fry before focusing on the dragon, bringing out my gargoyle since I haven't really used it in the entire run, just to take the heat off of me. And with my claws, the two dragons on the outside were put down easily enough. As for the interior, I flung around the long expired blood bags like the toys they are. At the very least, the Vampire Lord can flick levers, they just can't pick locks. Compared to what's to come, the spiders were squashed like they should. Second portion more or less the same, except the Draugr popped out of their tombstones pretty early. As for the Overlord near the end, if it was of non-issue back in Bleak Falls Barrow, it is even less so here. Just I have to untransform just so I can loot his body. I pop back into my Lord form, for all that I can describe was hell. So, did you know that there is an Elder Dragon and a Frost Dragon that hangs out near the portal to Sovngarde no matter your level, who are normally non-hostile? Today, they chose violence. I learned that fact very early on when the Elder Dragon landed on top of me, and I had to go back inside to avoid the heat. Back outside, my first call to action is to get rid of the whites, so gravity solved that problem. I got very lucky with the Elder Dragon because he glitched into his pillar vibe animation, letting me knock out half of its health. At this point, the Elder Dragon pieced out of the fight, so I had just the Frost Dragon to contend with for now. As long as I'm not in biting distance, I should be okay. I pelted it from afar with my Pew Shooter while the Gargoyle takes aggro and does a lot of the damage, while the Frost Dragon was on the ground. Eventually, the dragon was grounded for good, and we could pelt away at it until it inevitably succumbs to its wounds. Next up came the Cairn, since it has been quite a long while since I last killed him. I think since the April Fool's video. Yeah, robes don't protect you from an onslaught of claw marks. And since the gargoyles are not Durnehviir, it cannot steal my statue. Took like 10 seconds total, and when I went to revert to grab the staff to finish the run, the Elder Dragon decided to come back for round 2. A level 40 enemy and I'm only level 15. I love my luck. Thank God for invincibility frames. So for the second phase of the Elder Dragon fight, I hid behind a rock and pelted it from afar, bringing out my building decoration to swipe away at it, since I think it can probably one-shot me with a bite attack, or at least take a lot of damage for sure. So I let my gargoyle run at the dragon, bringing him to me, and once the dragon was in swiping distance around the corner, the onslaught by the two of us was enough to take it down, and we can loot the remains of the priest to head into Sovngarde. So, while I can play things fair with the Soon fight, I did not feel like playing fair today, so I brought out my Vampire Lord form. And you can see where this is going. He emerges from the other side, no worse from where. I brought out my victory party, and we can begin clearing away the fog to start the second Alduin fight. While starting the fight, I had my NA aim come back to bite me, but oh well. Once Alduin landed, I threw my bolts of lightning at him, and since this is the last fight, I just drink my potions like it is nothing. Just like hoarding elixirs in RPGs. I kept on buzzing at the worm, and since I have 3 AI companions, Alduin is nothing. Hell, I just fought harder dragons like 3 minutes ago. Didn't even need to bring out my Super Saiyan form. Eventually unleashed my final bolt, got stunned a couple times in the process, the dragon explodes, and successfully beating Skyrim as Serana-ish. After the battle, I decided to have some fun by throwing the heroes off the cliffs. Turns out if you throw Soon off the cliff again, he will stay inside the Hall of Valor, and since the doors are locked at this point, I have successfully soft-locked myself. Hooray! Anyways, the run itself was an alright one. Long one, that's for sure. Double the length of most of my runs, to be honest. Overall, I did struggle more with this run than others, mostly due to the fact I just don't like playing as a mage. To be honest, I was actually near the point of scrapping the run until I brought out the Lord form, where throwing enemies around made the run so much more entertaining. Overall, I think I did an okay job at the run. Sure, Serana never uses her Vampire Lord form in the game, but at the same time, Auriel never uses her werewolf form outside the time you transform into a werewolf, and she is the companion who loves being the werewolf the most. Though I will say the Vampire Lord does fall off quite hard. Its damage for its speed shooter is pretty lackluster, and enemy health pools balloon beyond the Lord's abilities. The Vampiric Grip is a very powerful ability just because of gravity. Hopefully you'll enjoy this run with how off the wall it got. This will probably be my last Skyrim run of the year. Had several back-to-back runs, and I have a couple Fallout 4 runs I want to get to. It has been a hot minute since the last one. Hopefully y'all enjoy this video. If you did, be sure to give a like, subscribe for more mayhem, and any other ways I can torture myself, leave it down below. This has been Orpheolus, and see you all in the next one.